Oh, good evening. So just bear with me, I'm just trying to sort out my phone so I can probably see any comments a little bit clearer if we get any questions. Can you just let me know if you can hear me okay and see me okay? That would be brilliant. Just say hi, just let me know who's on. Oh, hello Bliss. Good girl. Oh, hi Leanne. Take it you can hear me okay. And you can see me okay, even though I have a face for radio. But there you go. Right, you can say hello to Bliss. There you go. Yay. Hello monkey. Hi Kirsty. Oh, two Kirstys. Hi Kirsty. Hi Kirsty. Yeah, just chew on my face, Bliss. Good girl. Go on then. There you go. I know. There you go. Have that. So you may find that we have two visitors into shot every now and then. I mean, Rebel is just chilling over there, and Bliss is just down here with a couple of toys. Yeah, Bliss. Betsy says hi. Wanna go see Betsy? Okay, right. So obviously the purpose of this live is to just discuss and give you some pointers on how to work through separation related issues, shall we say. I mean, it's one of those topics that I could talk about for hours. I mean, and I hate to label things as separation anxiety because we don't really know too much about sort of what goes off for the dog. But one thing that we do know is that they can learn behaviours. Is it stress? Is it just the fact that they've learned a certain step of behaviours? But the fact is it still comes under that umbrella of a dog doing things to cope with being alone, when, you know, we know that they are social creatures, so they do like to be with us, near us. I mean, and to be fair, a lot of dogs are more social towards humans because obviously we feed them, and now that we're in lockdown, we are with them, you know, 24/7 a lot of the time, and it's kind of very unusual for them. And what it's also doing is interrupting potential sleep patterns, what they would normally do. And a lot of the times when we leave them to go to work, a lot of the dogs would actually just be probably asleep and recuperating, ready for these bursts of energy that they have, because dogs are what we call a crepuscular creature, so they are most active at dusk and dawn. And so normally when you wake up and they're going to have, if you're going to feed them twice a day like a lot of people do, then they'll have those bursts of energy around those times. And then when you leave, I mean, when I leave to go out to consults or out in the day at the weekend, and I check my cameras to see what my dogs are up to, pretty much Rebel is exactly where he is now, just curled up on the sofa. Just for anyone who wants to see, there he is. Can you see him? Oh, there's Rebel. Just happily chilling. Bliss is a little bit more busy, but often with her being in a crate, then, you know, she'll just be fast asleep. So only when my key goes in the door do they then start to animate and move again. So the important thing is, you know, we don't know how long this is going to last, but the reality is we have to start preparing now. It's no point waiting until lockdown is lifted or eased for us to then go, okay, now we're going to go back to work. And the poor dog has just then got to deal with this all over again. I mean, they've had to kind of come to terms, and most of them will enjoy having us around more, but it does upset that kind of normal routine that they're in, which is why I speak so often about ditching the routine so that dogs can have a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of novelty, so they can learn to cope with strange situations. But we're talking here about potentially a 3-month time period where they will become conditioned and they are going to get rewarded for lots of behaviours, and they're going to be around us all the time. So what do we need to do? So we need to think about how do we create opportunities for our dog to still have some independence, even though we can't go out that much, and we're allowed one sort of exercise routine per day. And how do we manage that to mitigate the dog's suffering with any separation related issues? And it is complex, you know, but we have to try and think of a way to do it for the best thing for our dogs. If we choose, sorry, Bliss is happily playing tug at the moment. If we happily just choose to carry on as we are and interacting with the dogs all the time, then when we do go back to work or leave them, they're going to wonder what's going off. And for some dogs, that will be too much to cope with, and they will have some strange behaviours potentially for a while. Right, so action plans. First things first is to create periods of independence for your dog and separation from you in the home if you can. So just like if you were going out for a meal, I presume a lot of you will probably be FaceTiming, doing WhatsApp, Zoom meetings with family members. Actually, when you're going to do that, do it away from the dogs. If you've got another room, even if you go into your bedroom, put the dog away like you would normally do if you were going to work, and then go and have that meeting, that FaceTime, without the dogs being present, to still keep that separation. Now, it is slightly different because your scent will still be in the house. The dogs are probably more going to know that you're there, but at least you're giving them some time away from you. The other thing to do is actually, even if you are in the room in the back garden, again, make sure that you're giving your dog some, what you might even term as forced rest. So rather than having them with you constantly, you know, and in a settle, which is fine, but take them into another room and pop them to bed so they have some rest away from you as well. So you're maintaining that, dare I say it, social distance between you and your dog, so that they can still keep that independence and not create any dependency on you. So if they're so used to being laid at your feet, and we think, oh, that looks really nice because they're very chilled and relaxed and calm at our feet, but they'll get used to being there, and then it can become a little bit of a secondary reward mechanism. So actually laying on your feet, brushing against your leg, getting that odd stroke from you, or even that odd treat, is part of that reinforcement mechanism that says they're getting rewarded for being next to you. And that's what we have to guard against. So you need to set up opportunities for you to reward your dog for being away from you. Okay, so any meetings that you have, any time in the garden that you're going to have some time away, and have maybe a few a day, you know, even if that is half an hour. These don't need to be massively long periods, but they need to be long enough for the dog to get beyond. And often there always used to be these time frames that we used to look at in sort of olden days of training, when we used to go, try and get beyond 20 minutes if you can, and if you're not seeing any adverse reaction, then you're probably going to be okay. What I'm not saying is to put your dog under stress. So for some people this might mean you're going to pop your dog away for 2 minutes to start with on their own, or 1 minute. It might even be 30 seconds, and it might even be 5 seconds. So you might be popping them into a room, leaving the room and coming straight back in. And if they're just still doing nothing, then we just go, you know, oh, good boy, good girl, reward, and come back in. Then the next thing you can do is to look at your own exercise routine. So we're allowed this one period. Now, I've been out 3 times over the last few days for my daily exercise, and only once did I take the dogs. Okay, and the week before that I took Rebel one day and then Bliss another day. So I have a multi-dog household, so I didn't always take them both together. So that enabled me to put one on their own and take the other one and mix it up. And then one day I left them both here and I went out on my own for my exercise walk. And that can be hard for people to think about, because when you're at home and you think, I've got to get out and exercise the dog, then what am I doing if I'm leaving the dog at home? I'm not exercising the dog. I've got to take the dog with me on that walk. You don't have to, okay? But, and it is a big but, you need to exercise your dog, okay? There are many, many ways to exercise your dog. And if you go onto my YouTube channel, there's, what, I think 150 videos now of different ways to play with your dog, different games, different training things you can do. There is so much that you can do with your dog on a day-to-day basis that can tire them out. Anyone who knows Bliss at the moment, I mean, Bliss is an absolute beast at scent work at the moment. It's something that she has really taken to a massive degree. And the great thing about scent work is I do 10 minutes of scent work with her sort of in the morning to kickstart her day. And I kind of feed her breakfast that way. So she will go out and find things and she'll bring it back and she'll get rewarded with a breakfast. After 10 minutes, she comes in, she's curled up on the sofa. I mean, I don't know if you can see her now. Oh, she's probably going to look up, but there she is. So she was laid down until I moved that. Typical Springer, as soon as you make the slightest little bit of movement, you know, she's moving again. So 10 minutes of scent work for Bliss was like, oh God, you know, she was zonked. But I can take her out for a walk with me for an hour and a half for 2 hours, and she's running around like a mad one, covering, I think, what was it the other day she covered? Like 28 kilometres in this very short period of time. And she still had all the energy in the world. But after 10 minutes of scent work, she was shattered, and that enabled me to just let her sleep and then disappear from her. So you can think differently about how you are exercising your dogs. The games that we've been doing on the 30-day squirrel challenge now, so 30 days sexier than a squirrel challenge. Both dogs, Rebel and Bliss, have taken their turn in doing those, and they've been very tired after each one. So do that to tire your dog out, and then you go on the walk without your dog to create that distance where you are away. Sorry, what's that in? So that's what I was trying to explain to my PA today. So it's hard because our brains are often conditioned to go, we must take the dog out, we must take the dog out, we must take the dog out, we must take the dog out. And we can't seem to get away from that. Oh, hi, Janet. Excuse me. If you do have any questions, by the way, just throw them up. I've got my other phone here in case I can't see on the screen, but I think my eyesight's not too bad. This is just coffee. It's got no liquor in it, so we're all right. So it's important to create this. Now, if you're worried about the walk and you're stuck in this one walk a day, then though technically it's a slight probably bending of said rule, but what I would do is I would still leave the dog here. I might walk around my block and then come back and pick a dog up. I mean, I know I've got to be careful about, you know, oh well, people are watching and saying, well, you've been out twice. I mean, realistically, this is about trying to protect our dogs and prevent some serious issues with our dog later. And I struggle to see that would offend anybody. You know, just doing a walk around the block and then doing your walk with your dog. But at least you've created a period where your dog has seen you leave the house and then you've come back and then you can then take them out. So that's something that I would do. And I, you know, if please, you know, don't want to get anyone into trouble, but that's what I would do, because I just think it's not really that much, you know, we're not really breaking the rules. It's still your one exercise, but you're just having a stop off to come and pick up the secondary partner, which is your dog. And part of that routine is preparing your dog for some separation related issues. And then on days when it is, I don't know, not particularly nice, then what I would be doing is leaving the house, coming back in, leaving the house, take an umbrella if it's chucking it down, just walk out your door, go to the bottom of your drive, walk back in, and just leave as often as you can, and then come back in and just pretend that nothing has happened. So I'll get there. So would you do it that way around, or would you walk and then drop them home? I think it would depend, Leanne, on what your normal cycle would be. So, for example, if you would get up in the morning, take your dog for a walk, bring them back, then go to work, then I might do it the other way around. Then I would carry on that routine of, right, I'm going to take them for the 20-minute walk or half an hour walk, bring them back, drop them off, and then do the extra half hour on my own. So I think it just really would depend on what your normal day would look like and what they have been used to in the years before. I'm a firm believer in kind of ditching the routine and trying to do things very differently as often as possible, which is why when I walk Rebel and Bliss, I sometimes leave through the front door, I sometimes leave through the back gate, I sometimes walk through the back gate, come back in, sit down for 10 minutes and go out the front door. I sometimes go to the front lamppost and then come back in and then go out 10 minutes later. And then sometimes I go out in the morning just to the lamppost outside so they can have a sniff and a scent, come back in, and then might go out for a walk in the afternoon. So I will try as much as possible to mix it up. But if you have a normal routine that the dog was comfortable with, there is nothing wrong in keeping that as your method to desensitize them to you currently being home all the time. So yeah, I think just look at what would work and then go from there. But if you would normally walk them, you would be removing some energy. The other thing to look at is what we call sort of high energy games. So you can do I do a lot of arousal up, arousal down, because one of the problems with burning energy quickly, so throwing a ball, chasing, a tug toy, and playing tug generally drives arousal up. And then if you were to try and leave after that event, your dog may struggle because the adrenaline and cortisol that's firing through the system is higher, particularly the adrenaline, because that's what's got the dog amped up. So what I would do with that is I would go from high arousal game and then into pretty much a calming, making it a non-event, absolutely. Then pretty much down to a sort of calmness, and as they are both now sleeping, and then I would wait sort of 10 minutes and then I would leave. We know that it can take a long time for adrenaline and cortisol to leave a dog's system, particularly probably more so if it's done through stress. Through playing games it can probably change quicker, but we're not pushing them to threshold in high arousal play. We tend to be keeping them under, so it can be a little bit quicker. But then that's when I would leave. So high arousal up to burn off that energy. One of my favourites is the tail whip game. So the tail whip game is I have a horse lunge whip with, not that there's much sheepskin left on that thing, but it's a sheepskin toy on the end of it that I just whiz around the garden, and Bliss and Rebel will chase that, catch it, release it, chase, catch, release. And probably you wouldn't want to be doing any more than, well, for Rebel no more than 10 minutes. For Bliss I'd probably still keep it. I mean, she's 10 months old, so I would keep her at probably 5-7 minutes, and then I would stop. Not because she would keep going, but because of the movements and the stresses that you're putting on joints, I like to keep those sessions short and then go straight into a calming game. And then when they're doing calming, the other thing to do is to practice keeping them, whether it's on their bed, laid on a rug, laid in front of the fire, not that the fire's necessarily going to be on at the moment, but laid in front of the fire if that's their normal place, and then just practice leaving the room and just making sure that you are as often as possible leaving them in rooms as you leave. So dare I say, nip to the toilet, make sure the dog's sort of away from you and just staying put, and work on that as an exercise routine. Say, right, I'm going to the toilet, so I'm going to set my dog up to go, right, I'm leaving, but I'm going to make sure they stay put, and I'm going to go to the toilet, come back down. If they stay put, then I'm going to reward them. So it's very important to kind of build those periods of independence. So I've got baby gates, and I've got penned areas and segregated areas. So because I do have a multi-dog household, I will often keep dogs that have different play mechanisms away from each other. So I'm constantly using these segregated areas to put different pockets in. and just leave a dog in while the other two rambunctious dogs go and play with each other to burn their energy, and the calmer dog that wouldn't necessarily like play like that would stay put, and then we'd mix them up. So having a gated community is wonderful for creating that, but if you haven't got it, obviously you just have to try and use what you can. So I will often put Bliss in the dining room while I'm in here, and then sometimes Rebel will be in the hallway while I'm in here. If I'm cooking a meal, sometimes, you know, Bliss will be in the kitchen with me, particularly if I want to practice on things like counter surfing, and then Rebel will be in a different room. So they're never always together, and then there are times when they are. So it's really making sure that they are proofed in everything possible that can happen, so that they don't worry about it. Because if I always keep them together, obviously the minute they're apart from each other, they can struggle. So for example, the other night I had Rebel upstairs with me in the bedroom, and Bliss was down here, and then a couple of days later Bliss was upstairs with me and Rebel was downstairs, and then I had them both up with me. Never the best move. I never get much of the bed when I do that. It's like Rebel is pretty good at sprawling out everywhere, but it's still useful to do. Then the other thing is about trying to keep them occupied while they are away from you. So some of my favourite things to do are obviously Kong toys. Now I think there are 4 colours now. So you get the light blue and the light pink, which are the puppy Kongs. Then you get the standard, excuse me if I'm going to sneeze, my hay fever has just started kicking in because the people are cutting the grass at the moment, so I do apologise if I do burst out in a sneezing fit. So the red Kong is your normal standard Kong. The black Kong is for strong chewers. I think I've only, yes I know Rebel. Yeah, there you go. Good boy. Go on then, hop it up. Oops, go on, hop it up. Good boy. Yeah, there's nothing in it, it's empty. So Rebel normally gets these ones, but I've only ever had one dog actually be able to bite through one of these. I know Bliss, and no, there's nothing in it. And what I would do with these is I would fill them with their soaked breakfast, or even, I know, look, there's nothing in it, or even put in some nice stuff. So I'll put a mixture of stuff in there. I might put some cheese, cram in some kibble, and then I make some, I just call it mush, which is basically their kibble in a bowl, boil the kettle, pour the kettle over it, leave it for a little bit, and it'll turn into like a Weetabix mixture. What's your tail, girl? And then I will put that in there, and then I'll freeze it. Okay, and it's great on warm days because it's nice and cold, but it takes the dog absolutely forever to get it out. So I think I did a video with Bliss when she was a puppy with her puppy one, and it took her about 45 minutes, and Rebel was about an hour and a half to get it all out of this one, because it's much harder to press. So once they've got so much out, the softer ones they can press and force it forward. No, there you go, you can play with that one then, girl. So there's a red one, so that you can see that there's a bit more give in that. So it's, once they've broken through, it can be a little bit easier to get stuff out. So they're good to just leave them with. So that Rebel's come down for a look now. So they're just easier to leave them with and keep them occupied while you do this routine of leaving. So it just keeps their mind on something else, and you're not around while they're having it. Now, what I would say as well is it's important that if you are going to give them things like Kongs, we do generally say that Kongs should be given supervised and things like that, and not sort of left alone with them, because there's been some very rare cases, I think, that where dogs have got their tongues stuck and things like that, but I've only ever heard of one case. But I've been using them for such a long time. But if you're going to use them, I would use them while I'm with them and while I'm not with them. Okay, so it's if you only ever give it to them when you leave, then it becomes a predictor of you leaving. Okay, so it's pretty much like the lead emphasis. If you think about the lead becomes a predictor of going for a walk, and then you end up with a highly excitable dog before you leave, giving a dog a Kong every time you walk out of the door, and you've stolen my thunder, Stephanie. There you go. It becomes the predictor of what's going off. So they start to figure out that, oh, you give me a Kong, that means we're going to leave. So now your dog starts getting anxious at the moment you give them the Kong. So it is important that they get the Kong at times. Sorry, I'm just saying, see what that one says. Just missed that. So Buster won't do that while I'm out. All he does is bark. I have tried everything and he doesn't stop until I get back. What else can I do? John, please help. Okay, so I say it depends on how you start it. So will he eat the Kong when you're there? Okay, so will he eat that Kong when you are in the room? And when does he stop? And when have you given it to him? Because one of the things that happens a lot of the time is that we only ever give it to them when we leave, because that's what we're kind of told. It's like keep them occupied, give them something to do. So for me, I would probably go to feeding his dinner out of it. Yeah, so I would absolutely go to giving him his breakfast that way, giving him his dinner that way, and giving him his tea that way, depending on how many meals you do it. And I would absolutely just do everything with the Kong. So everything with the Kong. So that becomes the new normal. Okay. So depending what food he's on. So what food is he on, Tracy? Is he on a mixture, or is he on dry, raw, wet? I'll just read this question well. So, Mike won't sleeping much during the day. I'm home doing training, even if I leave them in another room. So by this time of night they're zonked. Consequently now waking up at 6 a.m. Okay, come on to that in a second. Okay, so yeah, so Tracy, I think it's really got to be Kong, just everything in the Kong. So kibble and wet, yeah. So I would just I'd cram it into Kongs, and if you know, I've got, if you see my freezer, it's got about, I think now 30 Kongs in it, and I know how much of the food goes in. So what I do is I will weigh the Kong empty, and then I'll weigh it when it's full of food, and then I'll put it in the freezer. Okay, so if through the day my dogs have had, you know, probably most people know that I feed my dog very differently. I just carry their food with me and they get paid throughout the day. If I've got some left, I'll weigh that out and I'll go, okay, there's 70 grams left. Right, that's a full black Kong, or that's the Kong bone, or that's the red Kong, and then, or that's the licky mat. So depending on what's on there. So they will get that for their final sort of top up to make sure they've had their daily allowance of food. But if you're struggling to get him to accept the Kong, and the Kong is becoming a predictor, then if you give him everything in the Kong, pretty much he should soon be enjoying that Kong. And then once he's happy with the Kong in that regard, then at this point I would still not be doing it when I'm leaving. I'd still be doing this while I'm in the room, and then I'd leave the room and then I'd come back in, and I'd come back in quickly. And then over time I would go from leaving it very shortly and then just extending the time, but every so often throwing in a very short one, because what we want to try and do is something to put it onto like almost variable. So you hear me talk about variable reward ratio being the most powerful reward ratio. It's also the most powerful in doing everything on variable, because the dog just learns that, oh, she's left for 1 second, she's probably coming back, but I've just learned that, oh, she might be gone a little bit longer, but she comes back, and then you just build up the time, and then you go from there. Okay, so that's what I would do, Tracy. And if you do go to stuff like a frozen Kong, don't go to a solidly frozen Kong straight away. So don't know where that one's gone, but what I would do is, so decide what food you're going to put in. I mean, you can, if you've got anything really high value, if you really want to, you can just smear. I mean, I've seen stuff like Marmite, obviously peanut butter, and just smear it on the inside so it's a lot harder for them to get. And you can do something, but if there's something that they have a high saliency for, so something that they really value, pop that in and just do it at different times to get them really interested in the concept of getting the Kong, but it has to be at different times. But if you do go to a frozen one, what I did to start Rebel and Bliss off was I just crammed a lot of loose kibble into it, and then I probably had where that line is on, if you can see that, so where that line is just on there, I would fill that with loose kibble, and then the rest would be mush, and then that would be in the freezer. So all that would be left at the very end of the Kong would probably be about 1.5 centimetres of frozen, and then they would get through that, and then the cheese, the kibble, or the treats that were high value would spill out, and there'd be a massive reward. So all of a sudden now this thing becomes high value, and then over time I go to that much frozen, then that much frozen, until I've got to the whole thing frozen. So you're taking in a step process. Okay, so that makes sense, Tracy? So that's what I would try and do, is just to make everything out of the Kong, if you can. So let me just cover that off. So yeah, so they're not sleeping much during the day now. I'm home and doing the training. So even if I leave them in another room, so by this time at night they're zonked, and consequently now waking up at 6 a.m. Okay, so one of the things to do is to think about, well, okay, when am I training? So it might be that you change when you train. So maybe don't train in the day, train later on at night. Brilliant, Tracy. So yeah, so you train now. So go out and train. So you'll see me train at different times with Bliss. So sometimes I go out first thing in the morning and we'll do a scent work session. And then sometimes we'll do mid-afternoon. And then sometimes I'll go out. So the other night I was out at, I think it was 9:30, and we did a scent work session at 9:30. So I will really sort of mix it up. But I think, I'm not sure if I'm, so Linda, you've got the Good Dog level 1, I think you have, I'm not sure. But if you have, you will find on that program Settle. So that's got all the exercises to get you through to try and get a settle. Okay, so that's something that you can do for your training session in the day. So once you've gone on to that module, and I can't, sorry, yeah. So I'm right in thinking, Linda, that you've got that. So if you have, look at that settle, and then what I would do is in the day, practice that as your exercise in the middle of the day, and practice your settle, and then do some of the other exercises towards later in the day, so that your final part of the day, particularly if you're looking to try and get a good night's sleep and go through for longer, then, you know, as I say, the dogs are generally most active at dusk and dawn. So a great time to do a training session would be around about, well, now with us getting lighter, sort of, you know, 6-7 o'clock. You know, that would be a great time to start doing a training session, because it takes away them being that sort of chilled now and gets them ready and zonked for that day. And then if you do the settle exercise in the middle of the day, that just teaches them back to being calm in the day. Okay, does that make a bit of sense, Linda? I hope so. Just let me know. Betsy is never interested in her food. What else can you use as a treat? I sometimes use squeezed cheese. Yeah, Primula cheese can be used. One of the other things, as I said, I work with these, which are licky mats. So I don't know if you can just see them. So they've got little ridges on. That one's got little sort of pockets. And what you would do is you would smear stuff into there. And again, it's really about trying to make them interesting to start with. Yeah. So you've just seen I've picked those up. Just look at what happens when I get these. So. I know there's nothing on them, Bliss, I'm really sorry. But you can see that what that does is create an interest in them for the dogs. And what I did do to start with, I put some very interesting things in there. So I would put high value cheese. I've put like smoked sausage, you know, all kinds of nice intrinsic things on there to get them interested in the process, and then I would gradually mix it in with more interesting food, and then with the Kong again, it can be a case of just adding a few more interesting items. But I will be honest with you, Leanne, is that some dogs, you know, it's not their thing. So you might want to try a long chew bone, and I would have brought one out to show you, but I'm pretty certain that if I bring it out, the dogs will be all over the place with it, because I've got I use a lot of my high value food is Ziwi Peak, but everyone will curse me because Ziwi Peak is inherently expensive. I mean, it's really good stuff, but it's just so expensive. I mean, a 2.5 kilo bag is like 50 quid. It's £25 a kilo. It is ridiculous, but it's really good stuff. But what you can do if you what I tend to do with that is I will get some of my dog's kibble and I'll put it into a plastic container, and then I'll put a couple of scoops of Ziwi Peak in, so the smell permeates onto their kibble, so it starts to smell a little bit more like Ziwi Peak. Because I certainly could not afford to use Ziwi Peak as a food, but I use it as a way to create some saliency. But you just have to try and find what your dog's like. But if it was a bone, I mean, Rebel loves a bone, so I could give him one of these Ziwi Peak deer shank bones, which are really good. And in fact, he's had it probably about 4 times over the last month, and it's still pretty much solid. You know, it's pretty much, there's not much gone of it, so it will last a long time. So right, so what, Ziwi Peak, so how do you, all right, so you're starting good dog after the squirrel ends. Okay, cool. But yeah, so so Linda, when you get onto that exercise of settle, that's what I want you to focus on in the day, is focus on your settle exercise more. We'll come on to that when we go onto that Facebook group. So Ziwi Peak is ZIWI PEAK, and it comes in various flavours. They do a 1 kilogram bag, they do a 2.5 kilogram bag, and they do a 4 kilogram bag. I used to use the venison because that was my optimal, but that is like, yeah, so that's probably about 35-40 pound a kilo now. It's air dried New Zealand meat, so it's 98% generally meat based product, but it comes in these nice little squares that are very easy to break off and crumble and all sorts. So it's really versatile product, and you can, out of 1 little centimetre square bit of kibble, I suppose you'd still call it kibble, you can get about well, with my fat fingers I can get about 9 to 10 treats out of it, just in small bits. So it's really versatile, really worth doing. Okay, am I up to date with those? So Mia doesn't eat anything when we go out. We leave treats out and she eats them when we're back. Yeah. So Kirsty, what that generally means is that you have 2 systems at play with dogs. So you have the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. I don't want to get sort of too geeky, but the parasympathetic nervous system is linked to gut and digestion. And so if they're feeling slightly nervous or anxious, you get, I suppose we would call it fight or flight generally, and that's driven by the sympathetic nervous system. So when the sympathetic nervous system is at play, dogs tend not to eat. So it just means that they're under a little bit of pressure. But when I say that, I don't want you to panic and think, oh my God, it's horrendous, it's terrible. Because we often look at, and the way that dog training has gone a lot of the time is we look at stress as always being a bad thing. Well, stress isn't a bad thing. I mean, look at the stress we're all under at the moment. But when we come out of it the other side, we will be better for it in some ways. We'll learn a lot and we'll move on and we'll change things that we do. But you can only evolve through stress. If there was never any sort of stress in life, then nothing ever would have evolved. It's just a metaphysical theory, but there you go. So yeah, so stress is important, but we just need to try and minimize it. And if we can expose our dogs to little amounts of stress and get them to process through and then come out the other side, we end up with a much more robust dog that can then deal with, because our world's stressful for a dog if you think about it. Their predominant sense is their sense of smell. You know, we still try and communicate them through spoken word and pointing and physical signals, when actually, you know, a dog's chosen method of language is sense of smell. So, you know, we don't even understand that at all. So to live in our world is a very, very strange thing. And I always say to people, you know, when you move your living room around, if you decide to have a change around the furniture, your dogs will go around and re-sniff everything just to go and have a re-picture it in their brain. So, okay, she just barks when we put her in another room. If we are sat in another, she barks and scratches till we let her out. Okay, so this is where you kind of have to start really small, Kirsty. So if you think about what's being rewarded, okay, so she barks, she scratches at the door, you go and open the door, she gets you. Okay, so there's the reward. You are now back in her world and she's feeling good about that. So now when you try and leave her again, she will keep doing that because she knows that worked. Okay, so scratching at the door and barking worked. Now again, go back to the old method of training. That would be just leave your dog in there and wait for them to bark it out and scratch it out, and then you'll end up with no door and a very stressed out dog, because dogs will often just keep going. But when they've learned that something works, they will keep going. And the two methods that are at play there are what we call extinction and extinction burst. So if nothing gets rewarded, so if you just ignored the dog, the reward doesn't happen, and then eventually it would stop because there's no reward in doing it. But you get this thing called extinction burst, and if anyone's ever owned a collie, they will probably know what extinction burst is, because it's where they try even harder to get what they previously got rewarded for. So scratching at the door to be near you, you went and opened the door and they got you, so they learnt that worked. And then the next time you tried to leave them for half a minute, and then you tried to leave them for a minute, and then you gave in and let them in, so they learned to just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. So the way for me is, it really has to come right down to a really very simplistic method of put them in a different room. Whether you're going to do that either by a gate or a door, or, and at this point I might just put them in a room, ask them to be in the bed, and I'm going to walk into another room, but I might not even close the door. I'm just going to walk into another room and then immediately walk back in and reward them for staying. Okay, so it's that, put them where you want them to be. So if you're teaching a place, put them to where you want them to be, walk out of the room, walk straight back in, and I mean instantly. So there is no time lag here. At this moment in time, you are not even testing anything, you're just walking away. And for some dogs, this means half a step away from them. And I think, I always remember, I can't remember the name of the dog, but I worked with one border terrier, and I kid you not, when we started this exercise of trying to leave the room, my foot could just do that. So as a minute that my foot went like that, the dog broke. And it was like, we were there for ages. And eventually, and I think it was probably about almost like half an hour, it seemed like, of doing this with my foot, until the dog suddenly stayed, and then we were able to reward. But the great thing from that point was, very quickly the dog, I was able to go to 1 step, to 2 steps, to 3 steps, because it learnt the process. And it was that initial break that was really tough. It was really tough, because it was just like, yeah, lift my foot, lift my foot, lift my foot. Dog was, as soon as my foot moved, dog was coming off the bed. So yeah, you start off really small, and then you'll eke out the time frame, and then you'll go to closing the door. But when you close the door, you're going to virtually open it straight away and go back in. But what you're looking for is to reward them on the bed. And if they come off the bed, we don't get annoyed, we don't get frustrated, we don't get angry, but they get no reward. So there is this balance between, they get it right, they get paid, they get it wrong, nothing bad happens, but they just don't get the reward. And I'd always say you have to monitor the dog in front of you, because that can be really stressful for a dog as well. So not getting the anticipated reward that it was going to get can be tough for a dog to cope with. And I say there are many schools of dog training at the moment where you can hear about positive only, force free, balanced, all these different badges of honour. I always kind of say that I use probably words like force free, but I train without pain or fear, you know, and that's really probably where you need to be at, you know. So it's just this, because they need to learn that something's wrong. You know, I always struggle with the concept of trying to teach a dog from just everything being really positive and upbeat, because they will get things wrong. And you know, just like with our human children, you know, we do sort of learn that. But I will never, because dogs don't understand our language, you can't sort of impart any pain or fear. So train without pain or fear. But certainly if the dog gets it wrong, I have things like what we call non-reward markers. So if my dog's getting something wrong, I'll go, no, you got that wrong. And it's said that calmly, and my dog just looks at me and goes, oh, okay. And then he goes and tries again. And then he gets it right and he gets the reward. And then he just goes, I know what to do now. And then boom, he's off and running. So it can be a really strange thing, and with so many different views of trainers. And I think you've heard me say, we always used to say that you put 3 trainers in a room and the only thing that 2 can agree on is that, you know, the other one's wrong. So it's about trying to do the right thing, to say to your dogs, right, this is what we want. So if you're struggling at that very early stage of being able to leave a room, then you have to start really and that's why I'm saying now, start this now, because trying to start it when lockdown is eased or lifted a little bit is too late. You know, we're going to end up with a problem of, you know, we've got to go to work and we've got to leave the dogs and they can't cope. So we need to start this now and let it be part of your exercise routine, because I guarantee you that having a dog learn to be away from you, just in a different room, for just 5 minutes a day and having to stay on a bed while you go into a different room, is massively powerful, and will actually tire your dog out probably more than some of the walks that you might go on. Okay, so it's certainly worth looking at. Can you come and live at mine and help? Yeah, I'm sure we can arrange that once social distancing is sorted. But there's lots of things out there to help you, Kirsty, and I say you're on the Good Dog level 1 as well. So there's lots of things in there. When you go onto that settle as well, you'll be able to start using some of those things to walk away. And when we start looking at the sit stay and the leaves, you've got all that in there to just build you. So you know that's the 6-week course that you're on, and you'll get through that, and all those things will help you deal with these separation things and being able to walk away. But I say start small. So if you're struggling with a Kong, you know, try a licky mat, try the different saliences of food, because yeah, I'm not suggesting that you can leave a dog on Jameson's smoked sausage forever, but to create the value in an item that they might not necessarily have had value in, we can do something called transferring value. So if they have a particular saliency to a particular type of food, then I might actually only ever feed that food in the Kong, because then the value of the food transfers to the Kong. Does that make a bit of sense? So what I'm saying is that if I only ever feed the high value food in here, this then becomes a predictor of the high value food. And then I can get really smart by putting in some of their ordinary food and some of the high value, and then gradually I will lessen the amount of high value with more of the normal food, until I can get it right back to just being their normal food. Okay, so you can use that same principle on toys. So if I had a dog that would happily steal tea towels, no, we're going off the subject with separation, but that's to do with separation, but we would use the tea towel to get them to chase, but at the same time I would then have attached the sheepskin toy, and then I would gradually cut down the tea towel so that the only thing was left was then the sheepskin toy, and that would then transfer that value of the tea towel to the sheepskin toy and takes away now the dog wanting to chase tea towel. So with anything to do with separation, it is about, you've got to create this independence, you've got to create this time away. There used to be, like I say, this magic number of 20 minutes, but for me, if your dog can't cope with you being away for 5 seconds, if you can get to 1 minute, then do you know what? Whoa, happy days. That for me then is absolutely the massive saliency and massive success, to go from 5 seconds to 1 minute. If your dog can tolerate you being away for 5 minutes and then you can get to 20, then that's great as well. And if you can go from being 20 to an hour, then great too. Don't look at this when you start working on this. Do not think that you have to suddenly go to this magic number of 20. We're taking it in stages. So anything that your dog can learn to cope with, and if you can get from 5 seconds to a minute, then the good thing when you see that is you know that you can do it. You know you will get to where you want to get to because your dog has learned to do that. So from there, just practice time apart. Do whatever you've got to do. If that means you go to Gator Community, if it means that you go out into the garden and leave the dog in the house for short periods, and then reward the dog for being calm by letting them come out and be in your presence again. So again, with like the door exercise, what we're trying to do there is to get in before they start scratching the door, because that's what we want to try and do. We want to try and get in what we call an antecedent manner. So that just means before the behaviour happens. We don't want to wait until they're scratching the door. Okay, just bear with me. Because we've probably pushed that a little bit too long. So what you've got to try and do is have a notebook and go, right, and have a timer on your phone if you need to, or just make a mental note of how long it was. So if you put the dog in a different room and you close the door and you count to 5 and they start scratching the door, then you open that door on 4 seconds. Okay, and you practice just going out 4 seconds, open the door, 4 seconds, open the door, 4 seconds, then 5 seconds, then 6 seconds, then 7 seconds, and if they start scratching the door on 7, go back to 6. You know, and you can see that we take this in a very, very steady process. With anything to do with separation, we have to go very, very slow, because dogs don't really self-regulate. They're what we call of the moment creatures. So they don't rationalize through anything. A dog's amygdala is 5 times the size of ours. So that's where emotion is processed. Okay, but their cerebral cortex is smaller than ours, and that's where we process and rationalize information. Okay, so when they feel an emotion, whatever that emotion is, they feel it way more intensely than we do, but they cannot rationalize out of it. So once a dog is anxious about something, they will remain in that anxious state and they won't just suddenly get over it. So the principle of just leaving a dog to cope never really worked. Sometimes you can go, okay, you know, at puppy stage where a puppy might have been howling all night and you just stay up in your bedroom and you just battle through it. That's probably going to work more, because it's not, you know, you're not talking about an emotion as such in terms of that it's a natural puppy thing is to whine because there's separation away, but then they just go, nothing happened with it. But at a puppy stage, we often come downstairs and we keep coming downstairs to tend to the puppy, so the puppy gets used to making those noises and us coming down. So that's when it switches into a learned behaviour as opposed to an anxiety. But leaving a dog that is anxious, you know, I wouldn't do. So if I knew that Rebel was feeling anxious, I'd come down and I'd be stroking him, I'd be trying to comfort him as much as I can, and then I'll look at the problem and go, well, okay, I need to go through this very step-by-step process. So does that make a little bit of sense? Has anyone got any questions? I know I've rambled on a little bit there, but does it make sense in terms of how to process through and work along these separation related issues? So it is just about creating small segments of time away and then building them up. But if you can get to going out in these next few, so I would say, let's say we're going to be definitely in this situation till June. So we've got the rest of April, all of May, and then probably a large part of June to practice on this. And then hopefully by the time we get to June, we are creeping up into these stages where we can almost leave the house. And my target for anybody would be being able to happily leave the house, go for a half-hour walk, and come back and the dog be absolutely fine. That would be optimal, and that would be a great place to be before we start having any of these things lifted. So yeah, we practiced our leaving routine at the weekend, and the boys went out for a walk, and I sneaked upstairs to do some decorating. I could hear Betsy howling downstairs. She did settle after 5 minutes, and was on her own for an hour or so quietly and settled down after the initial howling. Yeah, okay. So howling isn't necessarily always, an anxiety issue. Howling is, I'm here, I'm on my own. So the howl can be a very raw form of communication to just alert that, that's where she is. But what could happen if you'd have gone down and then she gets your attention, she can link you coming downstairs to the howling, and then the howling then just suddenly becomes more and more and more. The flip side to what you could have done is when she stopped howling, is you could have then gone down and then give her attention when she's not howling. But I would have waited enough of a period, so it only has to be a very sort of short 10-second gap from the howling to be able to move into being rewarded for being quiet. But again, if she's settled, and the one thing we know about sort of separation, I can't remember the study, the name of the study, but what they found was that a dog that is laid on its bed looking like it's asleep. So if I was to kind of just spin that around there, and if you can see those two. So there was a study done where, I don't know, can you see Rebel? There it is. So there was a study done where they measured the cortisol level in dogs that were laid down like Rebel and Bliss there against the cortisol level of a dog that had actually chewed a kitchen to bits, and they actually found the cortisol level to be the same. So the dogs that were behaving like Rebel and Bliss still had a high degree of anxiety in their system, but they were choosing to deal with it that way. Whereas the other dog was doing what we call active coping and was choosing a behaviour to cope with it. Okay. Now, if the dog was laid down like Rebel and Bliss, suffering from cortisol influx, then that would be more damaging, because the active coper that's chewing the kitchen is actually dealing with the stress of the situation and actually removing some of that tension from the system, whereas the one that's just laying down isn't. The anxiety is just staying in there. And how would you ever know? Unless you've got a vet on hand to be able to come and just, take a measurement of bloods and everything and check those cortisol levels just to see where they're at. So it's a very complex area. But the more comfortable you can make them with your departure by just doing small segmental departures and then building up to this half an hour. But I say, if you're currently at 5 seconds, if you get to a minute, happy days. I'll be well happy with people who can get from that to that, and then the next step is going to 2 minutes and just gradually building it. Okay, yes, makes sense. Is it worth putting a stair gate on the door so we can still see her but isn't with you? Absolutely. I mean, I have a gated community. I mean, it's the barrier is there so that they can learn to do that. And then what I would do is, over time, I would then have the door gradually closing. So I might start with the stair gate and then having total visibility of me, and then I might go to closing the door just a quarter of the way, and then to half the way, and then to 3/4 of the way, and then to closing, but then opening very quickly. So you can see everything is about sort of step-by-step process. Obviously management, which is the baby gate, gives you that option to create that physical barrier and that physical sort of restraint from them coming to you, and then you can then reward them. So yeah, if you want them on their bed, then again, I'd probably be sat in this room like this, and if there was over the stair gate and they're laid and chilled, I might even throw a piece of their kibble over to them Yes, it may miss the bed, and they may get out of bed and go and get the treat. But then what it gives me another opportunity to do is to just wait, and then when they go back in their bed and lay down again, I can then throw another piece of food. And this may seem a little bit counterintuitive because you're going, well, they were going to settle, but you've just thrown another treat and they've got out of bed again. But if I wait for them to go in the bed and lay down before I throw the treat, the dog will work out, well, actually, what is triggering that treat to be thrown? It is me going into bed and laying down. That's what's triggering the treat to be thrown. And then over time, I'll just prolong the throw. So they'll have to be in the bed for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, and gradually build it up. Now, I will be honest here, I mean, that is what we call sort of, it is a little bit of counter conditioning and desensitization, and it is one of the slowest and hardest things to do in training. So for me, coupled with all of that, I would be playing lots of optimism games. So games that really shape a dog's confidence and ability to flex and ability to look at things in a much more different way. So what I've basically spoke about there is a way to keep your dog occupied, is the standard counter conditioning and desensitization approach. But then I want you to think about how do I shape my dog's confidence? Okay. And how we do that is by creating situations for them to have to work things out. Okay. So things like noise box. And if you go onto my YouTube channel, you will see plenty of videos of things like noise box, cardboard chaos, bottle knockover, all kinds of different games where a dog has to cope with things. So cardboard chaos is just get your recycling contents, put them in the middle of the garden or whatever, have them sort of stacked up and leant against each other, and just throw some of their food in and amongst it. Okay, they will go in, they'll sniff around, they'll pick a few treats up, the boxes will move, they'll jump back, they'll go back in, they'll eat some more food, they might knock a box off, that'll fall over. They may even plough straight in and the boxes might fall on them, but because it's cardboard, it's not going to do them any damage. It just introduces a little bit of stress, but they're going back in because of the saliency of the food. And then pretty much, if I do that game with Bliss now, she just ploughs in and just sends everything flying. It doesn't matter what's there, she will just send it all over the place. She's just not bothered. Rebel pretty much, well, Rebel just ploughs for everything. Noise box is just, you start with an empty cardboard box, and you will just put some food in it and let them eat some of the food out of the cardboard box. Then you will start adding items like plastic water bottles, Coke cans, you name it. Just start adding some various bits and pieces in, and the food's in there, and they're knocking them about, things are moving, and they're just trying to get the food. Then there are games where we just put boxes inside of boxes inside of boxes, and you can do this with toys or food, and you just put their favourite toy in. So if I was to get, say, a favourite toy and put it inside one box and then put that box inside another box, again, they've got to work through this to get to what they want to get. If you've got a little frame where you can just hang some, you know, like 2 litre Coke bottles, just hang those on and get the dog walking through them. So again, it's just all these ways of building confidence, balance paths. And I think, Leanne, I think I did a video, and I think it's with Betsy, where we did a balance path where I had lots of different things in my living room. So I had one of these, excuse me. So one of those, which is a Fit Paws donut. So it is specifically a dog training toy. Yes, bless you, know what to do on that. Which is, it's basically like a silicone ball, but for a dog, and it's just how they will stand on it, and it'll wobble, and they have to centre their core. So it's a very good exercise without going anywhere. So I don't know, Bliss, if you can see this, I'll pop her up. Come on then, Bliss, pop it up, pop, good girl. I don't know if you can see. So right, pop it up. Come on, pop up. Good girl. Come on. Pop. There you go. Good girl. So you can see how it will wobble, and she will have to just hold herself on that. Now I'm holding it and just letting it move a little bit, but you can see all her muscles sort of moving to try and keep her in sort of balance. So she has to hold her core, so I can feel her core sort of centered. So things like that are sort of what we call confidence games, and it just shapes that. It's a very different surface. It's got little nodules on it, so it's underfoot. And then I would do a ramp, and I did a balance board that wobbled. I mean, actually it was a human balance board, because I will tell you this, if you can buy anything that's human, because way better than buying it for a dog, because these, although they are designed for dogs and brilliant, again, very expensive. I think the dog wobble board is about 120 quid. I've bought a human wobble board for about 20 quid. So the human ones are much better. They just don't do the bigger size. And it just wobbles. So it's a bit like if you've got a seesaw, something that tips up. So just a plank of wood over a little block of wood. So as they're walking up, it just tips and it just changes. All those things seem innocuous, but they are all linked to your dog processing confidence and optimism. Okay, so if you can get a dog to walk up an item and then it tips and they just walk over, and very soon they're just walking up and down, they start to look at the world in a much more different way. So they can start processing. So for me, it's always two-pronged. Yes, we can do the counter conditioning and the desensitization, but we absolutely have to then shape some confidence. So I have a massive suite of games that we look at from a confidence point of view. Flexibility, just being able to change the way that we do things, different surfaces, different levels, all those kinds of things to encounter are very, very powerful for your dog. So yeah, so I think for me, that's your two-pronged attack for dealing with anything to do with separation. Absolutely work on confidence, and then the standard counter condition and desensitization in tandem with that. So I think I've covered everything. I'm trying to think on my notebook, because I wrote down everything that I wanted to cover. So I think we've covered everything. Has anybody got any questions about how we would deal with that? And I say, because we're in a lockdown situation, we obviously, it's made a little bit more difficult, but absolutely be in a different room. If you're having family Skypes or WhatsApp meetings or Zoom meetings, do them in a different room if you can. You give your dog that sort of little bit of an independence. If they would normally be on their own, let's say between 9 and 12, then try wherever possible to create that same scenario. It doesn't have to be every single day, but at least, you know, if you can do it once or twice a week, you know, that would be great, because it just keeps them in that zone of, okay, this is what happens. And then, like I say, if you can go out as well and leave them, you know, then that would be optimal, because your scent's not going to be, so, you know, if you're upstairs walking around, your scent plume is going to be wafting down the stairs, so they're kind of going to know you're there. And I'm pretty sure you've already found out that when your car pulls on the drive, or if you're in and your partner's car pulls on the drive, the dogs start to know these things, because they pick up that scent and just know what's going to happen. So yeah, absolutely. If you can, if you want to go out with the dog, fine, do, but maybe walk the dog first, drop them off, then go out on your own, or prepare the dog like you would in the morning, put them to bed, leave, walk around the block for 10-15 minutes, come back, pick them up, and then take them for a walk. Or, to be honest, I mean, I know, and I don't want to get anybody into trouble with any potential fines, but I might, if normally I would put them to bed, walk around the block, and then come home, you know, I might go out later on in the afternoon, because I've only done 15 minutes, and I know they say once a day, but I'm trying to balance this in the right way that I can, with doing the best for your dog under the current remit. And I think as long as you are following proper social distancing rules, and, you know, if you walk around your block and you don't encounter anybody, and then you come home and go out again, well, we're not putting anybody at risk, but what we are doing is trying to protect our dogs. One of the downsides is obviously when it comes to the law, dogs are seen as chattel, which is property. So of course they don't have the same rights in English law as humans do, obviously. But if you're an animal lover, and I think most people who kind of understand animal behaviour, you know, no one's really going to criticise you if you go out for 15 minutes and then come back and do a 45-minute walk later. But I know you might have different neighbours to me. So please be careful, please be sensible, and whatever you do, you know, please make sure we're following the proper laid down social distancing rules, because I don't want anybody getting into any trouble. But we really have got to start now. And even for me, and I work from home and I'm here a lot, but I do go out in the evening and do consults, and of course they haven't been happening. I've had some Skype consults and some Zoom consults where I'm here, but I'm still, when I can, I will put these to bed at that normal time of around 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then I will go out for a walk, or if I'm going to do my shopping, I will probably do it at that time. Often everything's gone by then, but you know, it ties in with what I want my dogs to be used to, because that's what I would normally do. I would normally be leaving around about those times, so I'm going to try and keep that the same. Okay, so I think I have definitely covered everything. Has anybody got any questions? Anyone got any points? I think I've covered everyone's question. I'll just have a quick scroll through, make sure I haven't missed anybody. No, not a problem, Leanne, as long as, like I say, that's the whole point, is trying to make it as user friendly as possible. It's when it's in my brain, it makes perfect sense, but obviously it's trying to make sure in this scenario, because this is all, I suppose, kind of new to me. I mean, I do a lot of videos, but doing something like this and trying to make sure it comes across in the right way is tough, but it's always a good learning curve, isn't it? But we're just trying to do the right things for our dogs. So okay, I don't think but if anyone has any questions, you can still pop the questions in this post. I'm going to pop this post up so it's there for people to see. I will also put it onto the YouTube channel. Okay. Ooh, what we got? Oh, thank you. Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do, is just put information out there that can be useful. And oh, Gillian, you're too kind. Thank you. But yeah, it's pop any questions down. I will pop this up onto my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, you know, for me, it's well worth going on. There's 150 videos on there of lots of enrichment stuff. There's currently 3 playlists on there. There is it was a 25-day Sexier Than a Squirrel challenge. It's the 30-day Sexier Than a Squirrel challenge now. So there's 30 different games on there, and you'll see the lives of me doing it with my dogs, different dogs, and of just how these things look and work, and also my little variation on them. So there's going to be 30 videos by tomorrow of that. That's all about making you more interesting than the environment. So for anyone who's on here, I know we're talking about separation, but if anyone's got any issues with disengagement out in the wild, that's a great set of videos to kind of have a look at to make you more interesting than the outside world. There's Bliss, How to Raise the Perfect Puppy. So in that playlist, there's just me doing loads of things with Bliss. But what I will say is, for separation related issues, look at some of the confidence games that I did with Bliss. They're not just puppy games. They are great games to do with older dogs. And then there's another set of just dog training videos, which have got all kinds of different things in there as well. And that's all just free content for you to go and have a look at. Obviously, you know, for anyone who's interested, I've got a couple of people on here that are doing the Good Dog Level 1 course. So that's a fantastic course that we set up with a group of probably the world's, what I would probably say is the world's best trainers at the moment. And they train dog trainers. So they're my It's where I go for a lot of my CPD and keep myself up to date with the latest technologies and latest sciences in dog training. So we've created a course that is a 6-week program. It's a great, obviously that is paid, that's a paid course. And then recently I've just been very, very busy because I've been, obviously, technically we're not a prohibited business. So we technically can still be open, but if somebody, in terms of daycare, if someone was to bring their dog here, if they're not a key worker, they could be classed as unnecessary journey and could be fined. So I don't quite know how that works. And then in a consult wise, I can technically still go out to people's houses as long as I practice social distancing when I'm there. But it's like, you know, it's all about risk and reward. So technically we can still be open, but it just seems a ludicrous situation to be in. And I'm self-employed, so I'm still waiting to find out whether I will qualify for any help. So I've had to quickly adapt. And so there are a lot of my own online courses now that we've produced. So for anyone who is interested, we have courses out there on scent work. So I've just done a beginner scent work. We've done counter surfing, we've done car familiarization, we've done a door protocol and a disengagement protocol. So disengagement is again another cool one, very sort of short course. So there's some mini courses there. And very soon we have a rapid recallers course coming out and a rock solid retrieve course. So they will also be available very soon. And I've just currently started filming our active scent work, and I'm going to do a mini gamers bundle as well, which is a bit more instructional on how some of these gamers works and the mechanics. But I say to anybody, get onto that YouTube channel, because that has just got so much great content on there. And for anyone who, if you've never worked with me or haven't seen anything that I've done, that's a great thing to go on and just have a look at the way that I train and the way that I work with my dogs. But I'm just trying to make stuff available that might be helpful to people, and try and keep my business afloat, dare I say it, because it's pretty worrying for a lot of people. And I know that I speak to a lot of people in the industry, and there's a lot of worried people, and there's a lot of businesses already that are no longer doing dog boarding, dog daycare, dog training, because they've just kind of packed up. So it's quite sad really. But anyway, not going to end on a sad note. So anybody got any final questions? Anyone got any pointers that they would like on separation? But use your opportunities. So if you need to go to the toilet, look at it as an opportunity to train. If you need to go and you've forgotten your keys and you've left them upstairs, look at it as an opportunity to train being separated. So don't just I mean, sometimes, yeah, just leaving can be the right thing to do, where you just go, right, I'm off, and just do it as a matter of fact. But look at the opportunities that you have in the day where you can go, do you know what, I'm going to practice the process of me leaving like I would in the morning. So dare I say it as well, just, I don't want to drag this on too much, but if you would normally get up, have a shower, put your makeup on, as you can tell, I do. And then you would leave, then it's worth every so often doing that protocol, because remember I said about a sense of smell? So if you would normally spray some perfume or splash some aftershave on, then that is also one of those trigger points. So it's well worth still putting that aftershave on, even if you're not going to go out, because it will take away what aftershave means. Does that make sense? So normally if you would, alarm clock would go off, you jump in the shower, you brush your teeth, you come downstairs, have a coffee, aftershave, and then leave. The aftershave is part of that predictor for leaving. So sometimes it's well worth going through that whole routine but not leaving as well, because you've got an opportunity to desensitize them totally to that departure routine. So have a think about that as well as one final point. Do your departure routine without leaving. Okay, so yeah, you're going to get your business suit on, or your whatever you would go to work in, put all that on, put your shoes on, but then just go and sit down and have a coffee and just make it like a nothing event. Okay, but I say, any comments, any questions, still carry on posting beneath this, and I will answer them as they crop up. So finally, stay safe, hope you're all well, and I will see you very soon. But thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to me to waffling on for an hour or so. It's been great. Take care, guys. See you soon.